This is Web Suspect, and I'll be doing a video on just why the quote-unquote patriot movement is supporting Cliven Bundy. These people would probably never support me or anybody else in the quote-unquote truth movement. This is a picture of Cliven Bundy's ranch next to the Bureau of Wildlife Management. They've claimed they've homesteaded the property since the late 1800s, which means that the land was open for people to move into, and they've lived there since then. Cliven Bundy hasn't paid, according to the articles I've been reading, he hasn't paid grazing fees to the Bureau of Wildlife Management in 10 years. Now, he owns a 160-acre ranch, and I've had a tiny bit of experience with large animals. In fact, my family adopted a donkey from the Bureau of Wildlife Management in 1983. Any large animal will graze the land that it's on like this until nothing grows. You've heard me use the term, they will eat every stick of grass until nothing grows. And then all this area around here is green grass. Now what happens is, in between, this all becomes subject to runoff, and in the Bible this was all done in cycles. So every 7 years you would sell off all these cattle, and for a year let the grass grow back so that the soil wouldn't all wash out. You might even do that for a period of longer than that. I was trying to get this loaded earlier and I had some problems and I had to start the video. This is some of the area that's been used for grazing on the Bureau of Wildlife and Land Management. And as you can see in some of these pictures, there's no grass growing. People say it's desert, but if this grass was left alone for a while, it would grow back. Now with cattle, when you're working cattle, you graze this area, and when they've eaten all the grass so nothing grows, you just move them to another area and they eat everything that grows. And the object is to just keep doing this to keep the cattle alive. And it's very difficult on the land. Now the government's argument on this, as you may have well known, is that there is a rare and exotic desert tortoise that lives out here, and it's competing with the cattle for land to graze on, which is probably true, but it's a very small issue in the term of land management. I suspect possibly if the patriot movement actually understood what was going on, they might actually support the government on this one. There's some facts here from an article from the Washington Post entitled "Everything You Need to Know About the Long Fight Between Cliven Bundy and the Federal Government." It confirms that he hasn't paid grazing fees in the last 10 years. And there's some different numbers here ranging from $300,000 to $1 million, and that the government has rounded up all his cattle and is going to sell them. And Cliven Bundy is supposedly a millionaire. He could pay the grazing fees if he wanted to. There's other people who live in the area that pay a grazing fee, and their cattle has to compete with his cattle. And a lot of times with ranchers, if cattle are born out on the range, and they're not branded, then it's just fair game for somebody to grab, and it's all kinds of unscrupulous stuff goes on, as you can see here. But all these other people who have cattle in the area have to compete for this land. And if Cliven Bundy's out there illegally grazing his cattle, then he has to compete with all these other cattle. Like I said before, we had a small animal, but if you have a small animal on an acre, it will pretty much eat all the grass till it looks like this. I have video which I've put on private for a while. Maybe I'll put it back up later. And the cattle that aren't on this land, or equines or whatever you have, the grass will grow green, and as soon as they move out, they will eat all the grass. And so that's just the basics of it. It's just very basic. I'm sure a lot of people know this or maybe aren't aware of this issue, but like I said, all the competing cattle people have to compete with this. There may be people who are paying grazing fees. It's not fair for the people who are paying grazing fees to go out, and Cliven Bundy's cattle are eating all the grass and he's not paying fees. In addition to that, I was saying that his property is 160 acres. So if you have a couple of these animals, about one per acre is almost workable. So he could have 160 cattle on 160 acres, but the fact is that he's just using this area that he has as a holding pen while he puts these cattle out to graze, and then he's hoping to kick their fat storage up and everything so that they can get big and strong and make more cattle, which he can't do on his property, because as you can see here, his property is not green and the property next to it is green. So like here's another example here. He's feeding them hay. the cattle have grazed out all here, then the property next to it is green. So that's just my perspective. I don't know why there's always stupid stuff like this. I'm surprised Mark Dice isn't out there, you know, putting his 2 cents in. You know, if it was a worthy cause, I would be almost interested to go out there. I would really like to see some more intelligent discussion from the Bureau of Wildlife Management other than it's a turtle. So they're failing to do their job, you know, talking to protesters, sticking dogs in their face, barking dogs in their faces. They just, you know, as usual, when I call these things out, the only thing missing from the landscape is intelligent discussion. I have yet to see any intelligent discussion with this whole incident. I would like to see some intelligent discussion from both sides.